thing for that, and the difficult catch in there is that just like the rivers still being here, nothing changed. The bills still come, even though they're written by Accenture and we're paying Accenture. It still says BC Hydro, and the guy coming to the door who's reading the meter still says BC Hydro, even though he's Accenture. The BC Hydro setup with the Transmission Corporation allows a market energy, what are they called, energy trader, to be put in place for our exports, and it's the exports in this system that allow us to make $1 billion a year, and in the future really is the place where the public of British Columbia will find the wealth that came to the other great energy producers in history, and we have the finest green energy asset in North America. The public of British Columbia owns it, and it's being stolen. We're not giving it away because people don't know that it's going on, so essentially it's being stolen. But the interesting thing about that is that how you wonder how that could occur with the money, and the way that the market maker enters the system is through contracts between the Transmission Corporation and U.S. energy regulators, which have been written. We've seen the overviews from the Utilities Commission, and they're signed, sealed, and done. So that's ready anytime. But they're going slow enough with that so that the rivers can be swept up. And just the other day, the Utilities Commission did a change to the ownership and the rates paid to one of the private power producers on one of the rivers. And when we checked with the Utilities Commission, there's no way to establish what those changes are because they're confidential and secret. So not only are we allowing it to go, but we're forever sealing the information.
With the whole plan to privatize and to do what they're doing, for us there's the issue of the salmon resource, there's the issue related to all those kinds of issues that relate to the river or relate to the water. And so it's very critical for us to be in on the ground with this stuff before it gets privatized, because as soon as it goes into third-party interest, we lose our ability to be involved. When it is Crown land, we can actually be involved.
That's right.
And I think that's the critical part right now, and that's what the province has been doing. Behind closed doors, it's really just business as usual. Alienating Crown land just at a tremendous rate, actually, through resort development, through just privatizing parks, or doing a whole number of things that all behind closed doors because they have a majority.
Well, when I heard Arthur Manuel the other night speak about the $250 million that have been essentially pushed into Indigenous hands in this treaty negotiation process.
It's not really a negotiation, remember?
Well, in fact, it's kind of like enforced indebtedness.
Well, it's a mortgage process. It's like it's a real estate transaction. You're mortgaging your future.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what's going on.
To force what is your land into this fee simple thing, which is insanity. And so when we found out about the government giving the Mount Currie Band and the Douglas Band money to talk about hydro deals, well, we thought that they would be in an open debate and they'd hear the stuff that we learned. But in fact, it was all very closed with the BC Energy Association and Pembina Institute and the Community Electric Association, which has nothing to do with the community at all, is virtually an arm of the government, talking to those two particular groups in isolation, essentially. And so in the Ashley situation where the community was involved, the Squamish Nation was around us and said, we're in favor of all these things, it's open. And so we thought, well, with 65 of them in that area, the Ashley being a wild spirit place, the thing being turned down in zoning, we thought that the Squamish Nation would actually embrace us and say, thanks, that's good. But in fact, 6 months later along came Bill 30. So our spirit is broken. And I don't like that. I simply do not like to have my neighbor's spirits broken at all. And I think we should regather our spirit together and turn around, realize what's at stake, and save these rivers.
But the issue you just talked about, the nations you referred to, really it's around 2010. And truly it's the image, those nations you referred to are all within that context of where the Olympics are taking place, and it's done purposely. It's to buy consent. It's the best way to put it. I could explain it now. If it did that in other parts of the province, like as an example, the Adams River is one of the rivers they're looking at privatizing. It's the salmon stock of the world. And they're going to privatize this river? They try to come at in the interior, it wouldn't happen. So I think we've got to be conscious of the, when I talked of manufacturer consent, how the Premier's doing it. He's doing it very purposeful, very high profile. We talk about bringing in Schwarzenegger and Suzuki and these guys.
On the 2nd of April.
On the 2nd of April, it's like, hello, it's a process, right? And so we have to be really conscious of what we're dealing with there in terms of a majority government that has no accountability to the public as a whole, let alone First Nations.
Renewable resources and the energy that's produced from them are literally going to be worth their weight in gold, and we cannot afford to give that away to large corporations.
Yeah, John, after your experience in so many years, you're a realist. What do we do in this situation?
Well, there's a couple of short-term things. The most important probably is a moratorium on any future water licenses being given out.
That's been called for three times now.
Absolutely, that has to happen because we have to stop any further giving away of our resource. And the same also in terms of the wind farm issue, that we need to say no more Crown land be given up for these projects. That has to stop. And I think that the point that was made earlier about public education, one of the reasons all this is going forward is most people are simply unaware of the value of these resources and the future implications of giving them away now. So I think when people do understand what's going on, they will be pushing back to force the government to change the policy fundamentally.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Professor Calvert.
So I think it's time that we join forces truly and took a stand. And I think we've got to look at it in all aspects, whether it's public protests, but also litigation. I think class action lawsuits, things that can put a halt to this process so that they're held accountable. And the legal system in today's, especially with the patriation of the Constitution, seems to be an avenue that people can use. I think this is a public trust. This is an issue for the public interest of all British Columbians to step forward and let's do something collectively. Well, I think they've got to go in with their eyes wide open, and simply because the issue of consent is really critical to this process and consultation. If, in fact, they get a process where they're being consulted, they best get the best minds on their side as well to look at these issues, because these are long-standing issues that are going to shut down the rivers. So, salmon production and all those other things we talk about will be halted. It's going to affect their way of life. So we really have to look at it, and it's that whole thing of poverty versus economics. And I think the issue is economics. Somebody came to us and said, here, you can have $2 million a year for the next 40 years, and you're impoverished. What are you going to do? You're a community of 60 people. You have no hydro. Hydro line goes right beside you. What do you do? And I think that's part of what's going on with some of this stuff. They're approaching those communities that are impoverished and utilizing this as an economic tool to get their consent. That's what I see happening. So they really should examine this very carefully before they make any decisions and sign any agreements that are going to basically extinguish the rivers. And in some ways, through the production of hydroelectricity, which is a clean resource, that's actually going to kill the rest of the river. And I think the only possible way, and I'm not too clear about, is a class action suit to initiate against the public trust of the province, the Premier specifically, and what he's done, and to hold them accountable. That's the only way it can be done, so people can feel they're involved, but also build an education process into it so people really know what's happening. Because that's the issue. People, when people don't know, and things happen. That's what's going on here. Like, this is 6 years this is into the process, and a lot of people don't know. They don't know what the offshore issues in terms of the company that's held up in Bermuda, Accenture, yeah.
It's running hydro now.
Yeah. That's an offshore company. So those kinds of issues are really important in terms of looking at this. Like, that's something that people don't think, well, how does that connect? They don't realize that the transmission corporation side of it has been separated from the hydro utility side, and why that was done in terms of creating a market. And there's somebody there to create that market so you could sell the power. They don't know those kinds of things. That in fact, it's, like I said, at the end of the day, everybody that's left in BC are the people that are going to have to pay. Whether you're poor or whether you're rich, you're going to have to pay. And that's the issue here, and people don't realize that.